beyond the difficulty of roster management, from the waiver wire to taxi squads to even trying to make trades, there's dealing with COVID. We've seen the NFL particularly, and the NBA recently, and some NHL teams having to deal with COVID and what that does to a lineup. Obviously, the NFL is different than the NHL or NBA, but you have teams that are going with less than optimal lineups. And in football, it's a 53-man roster, and the NHL, it's 23. And so it's different, but that will actually amplify things as well. If the Oilers, who are now faced with not having Mike Smith in the lineup, or any other team, all of a sudden runs into a rash of injuries.
Of which the Oilers have not had. So they can't use that as an excuse. They can't say, right, oh man, we've got 5 guys out.
Not yet.
They have a goalie out, and they, I guess COVID protocol means that James Neal and Gaetan Haas haven't been there. But it's not like they've got 6 players out with injuries, and then they're really dipping into the taxi squad. So
what does happen to a team when all of a sudden, there's a rash of injuries and they have to call guys up and change the makeup of the lineup? I mean, I guess it depends on who's missing. It's one thing if you're missing Jujhar Khaira or, let's say Dominic Kahun went out. It's another thing if you're missing one of your stars. But, if you're having to bring in new guys, and I suppose this year the taxi squad is practicing with the team. But, what does that do to the makeup of a lineup? Does it really change the chemistry?
Well, yeah, it depends. If the Oilers, if McDavid or Draisaitl or Nugent Hopkins miss any significant amount of time this year, they're in big trouble because there's no one there that's going to replace them. And you look at your bottom 6, yeah, those guys sometimes are interchangeable depending on what you're asking them to do, whether one guy kills penalties or one guy plays in a particular role or you need one guy to bring some physicality to the lineup. But right now, the Oilers for the last couple of years have been lucky in that regard, that they haven't lost guys for a significant period of time. Now, this year, you could make the argument they lost their best defenseman in Oscar Klefbom. He's out for the year, and that's a tough guy to replace because he did everything for Edmonton last year. He played on a power play. He killed penalties. He played a regular shift. He was up to, 28, 29 minutes a night sometimes last year. So that's a big, big guy to try and replace. But it's something that good teams do. Good teams have depth, and that's whether you have guys that you've drafted it and you've developed, and then you have guys that they can come up and fill those roles for however long they need to, whether it's a week or a month or 5 days or 10 games or whatever it is. And right now, the Oilers don't seem to have that because the bottom half of the lineup in the NHL looks thin as it is. And never mind getting into the taxi squad guys or getting into the guys that are supposed to play in the American Hockey League this year. And I think that's one of the issues right now. This is a roster that's really, really top heavy. You have McDavid and Draisaitl making $20 million, and then you have the rest of the roster, and the bottom half of the roster are all $1 million players. And I think those guys are interchangeable $1 million players, where you're not going to interchange a guy that's making $8 million a year, a guy that's making $12 million a year. And I think that's the situation right now for the Edmonton Oilers, is they're counting a lot on those top-end guys, and they're not getting enough from their bottom-end guys, at least through the first 4 games of the year.
The teams that are successful have young players on entry-level contracts, offensive players who break out, like Pittsburgh with Jake Gunsel and other people like that, and they're still only making $900,000. Now, the Oilers have one of those in Yamamoto, who looks every bit as good this year as he did in a lot of games last year. I think he's been quite good for the Oilers. But they don't have a lot of offensive players, offensive forwards of that ilk to score goals. They have a lot of interchangeable, as Derek said, bottom 6 players who can move from 4th line to 3rd line. In Kahun's case, sometimes he can play in the 2nd line. Tyler Ennis can kind of move up and down. But they don't really have much after, as Derek pointed out, Draisaitl and McDavid and probably Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in terms of scoring a lot of goals. Certainly not a lot of goals coming from the wing. Their 3 best forwards are all centers, and one of the centers plays the wing. So not a lot of scoring from the wing after you get past the top-heavy, high-end, big-ticket players.